Welcome to our presentation of Ethics for Insurance and Financial Professionals, Questions for Consideration and Discussion with Robin Mueller, Part 2. I am Brendan Burnett, NAIFA's Director of Professional Development, and I want to welcome all of you to our presentation, as I said, Part 2, on the topic of ethics. Robin Mueller entered the insurance business in 1979. And he has been an agent in field management and in the home office. Robin is a past president of NAIFA Milwaukee and NAIFA Wisconsin. He's also a Distinguished Service Award recipient for each of those associations. For 3 years, Robin served as president of the Foundation for Insurance and Financial Education. He has authored 2 of NAIFA's programs in a box on the topic of multi-line transitioning and ethics. And he's also a frequent presenter at NAIFA, also has spoken at Gamma, NAFIC, and MDRT. And he currently travels America as a professional motivational speaker and entertainer. And some of his most requested topics are Social Security, retirement, and taxation, specifically how financial products work with Social Security, multi-line transitioning, cash value life insurance and life insurance fact-finding, annuities, and ethics and suitability, our topic for today. Robin also is a professional speaker on sales ideas, motivation, and speech and presentation techniques. Robin, welcome.
Hey, Brendan, thanks. And for those of you that are together with us this afternoon, welcome in to this ethics webinar. Those of you driving, please be safe out there, and those of you that might be doing some other work while listening to this and trying to pick up a CE ethics credit, doing other stuff that really wouldn't be real ethical now, would it? So, Brendan, I think we talked about this 2 months ago. I'm not an entertainer. For those of you that are listening, you will not hear me grab a microphone or pick up a guitar and sing and play for you. I think, Brendan, it says entertainer, and hopefully all that means is that this little session here for an hour goes by quick for all of you listening. We have some fun and you learn something at the same time. That's really the intent of that word. So, and interesting to note that I did copyright that in 1996, and now there's someone in Denmark using it. And I kind of figured the thought that I'm not pursuing it, certainly that's intellectual property. I'm not going to pursue that copyright simply because the fact that someone from Denmark and I competing against the same business probably is never going to happen. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we all drink from wells we haven't dug, and we all enjoy shade from trees we haven't planted. So again, welcome in. Been studying ethics for 20 years. Those of you that were on the May 29th webinar, be patient with me for the next minute or two. Those of you joining us today, I want you to hear this. I sit back, and certainly a question I cannot answer, and I can't make any of you that are with us today more ethical. I believe you're either grounded or you're not. I think of the word sincerity, and I want you all to think of that word just for a minute. Sincerity. You either have it or you don't. If you have it, you can't hide it. If you don't have it, you can fake it, but only for the short run. Certainly, insincerity will surface in the long run. And so I think of how difficult it is then for us working ethically, how tough it is in the short run to compete with someone who's unethical, someone who doesn't care, someone who will say anything and do anything to get the business. Certainly in the long run, that's going to surface and they will lose. But in the short run, they might have a one-up on us to get that business. So what's the goal then? What was the goal 2 months ago? What's the goal for the next 55 minutes today? Is to make you think. If I can make you think about some of these questions that you're looking at, then I think we've succeeded. So with that, to bring us full circle on May 29th. Congress was trying to redefine the word confidential. And I know when I sort of surveyed the group 2 months ago, I think the word that surfaced the most when you hear the word confidential or see the word confidential is privacy, private, remaining private, privacy, etc. Other adjectives came up, but that seems to be the one that surfaces the most. And what Congress was saying is maybe what we want to do is change that definition from privacy to, hey, we should be able to release all information as long as it means no harm. And that's where they were going. You should know that that went all the way to the Supreme Court. So we were having our last webinar on May 29th. On June 24th, the Supreme Court had made the decision 6-3 to stay with the broader definition in keeping in confidentiality, meaning it will remain private, and eliminating that piece that others wanted, saying, hey, we should be able to release everything as long as it means no harm. So there is conclusion to it now, at least for now, where that earlier in spring was up for debate where it was going to end up. June 24th, 2019, the Supreme Court 6-3 said we're going to keep the broader definition of confidentiality, which simply now means privacy. Then, for those of you 2 months ago that were with us, you might recall of the 10 to 12 questions we have here, we only got through 3 of them. How cool is that? That we can develop, is ethics black and white, whose best interests, and what really is transparency, that we could develop that into a full hour conversation. Those of you that were involved know that you were sending information over to Brendan, and then he would send it over to me, and we'd talk about some things, and hopefully that will remain. Again, if you were here 2 months ago, you know exactly where we settled on those 3. For those of you that weren't, quickly, a minute or 2 just to bring you up to date. The most of the dialogue was around question number 1, is ethics black and white? And I think in the end, most of us said, no, it's not black and white, which always then brought us forward to, well, is it situational? Then is it situational ethics? So today it's this way and tomorrow it's not. But in the end, to summarize, after probably 30 minutes of talking about this, is perhaps we author our own definition of is ethics black and white. And that seems to be where most settle in. The second question, we talked about best interests. Very interesting. As you know, to give you that history, in 2010, the United States Supreme Court was asked to define fiduciary, and they threw it back at us back then and said, we believe it to be poorly defined. And as you know, the Department of Labor years ago came out and said, well, what we're going to do is define it as best interests. And I jumped on that right away around the country and said, okay, fine. Those of you that are advisors out there, I get it, NAFA, and I know the last word is advisors. Those of you with the CFP acting in a fiduciary capacity would say we have best interests of the customer. That's really what that word now, fiduciary, means, and you hear that advertised a lot. But what we talked about last time and what I've taken around the country is whose definition of best interests. And while we could role play this out again, and I'm choosing not to because we need to move forward, I'm just trying to bring you up to speed, is we looked at least 5 different definitions of best interests. I think I worked with Brendan on this, and we have the customer's definition of best interest, the agent's definition of best interest. If you're an agent, you represent the company. If you're a broker, you represent the applicant. But in almost every state, your law would say agent represents the company. So you'd have customer's definition of best interest, the company's best interest, the agent's definition of best interest. If you happen to be a licensed agent, works in a bank, you have your employer or the bank's definition of best interest. And if you're out there selling securities, you have your broker-dealer's definition of best interest. And so what we left it with was whose definition. And this will be interesting when that first lawsuit's brought forward in court. Whose definition? When things are going well, everybody's happy. When things don't go so well, people want to blame others. And this will be interesting when that consumer comes back at one of us listening today and says, you weren't in my best interests. And we'll see then how the court defines whose definition of best interest. I always submit this. Brennan mentioned this in my introduction. I've been licensed for over 40 years, and if I'm having someone bring me in to talk to them about life insurance or annuities or whatever, I would think after 4 decades I sort of know what might be in their best interests. And if the customer thinks they know what's in their best interest, my response is, well, why are you hiring me? And so, interesting. And I just want you to think about that. Right now, we know it's defined as best interest, fiduciary's best interest. Whose definition? Number 3 was transparency. And we had some great dialogue on this too. Years ago, that word kept coming up over and over and over again. And those of you that were listening 2 months ago, I took it out of the political arena and just said, what does that word really mean? And is it here to stay or is it a buzzword? And as I travel America, whenever I ask that, I get far too many definitions of what people think transparency is. And I kind of thought I could hone it down to 2 words, full disclosure. But I couldn't. It was all over the board, which implied to me maybe. I don't hear it as often today as I did 3 years ago. So maybe, in my mind, it was more of a buzzword rather than here to stay. To be determined, I think. If we take it out of the political arena, simply put it in ours, to be determined. But what I was hoping for is transparency, that as I would travel the country in all different venues, insurance, real estate, other sales, that we could come up with 2 words, full disclosure, but we have not been able to do that. So that's where we left off, and our time ran out, and so now we begin with question number 4, and this is fascinating. Those of you from last time know that I love the interaction. My understanding is I don't think I'll be able to hear you, but you'll be able to type in a question that gets over to Brendan, and then he'll share it.
Robin, that's correct. And our attendees may do that through the Q&A or the chat box. Either one, please.
Great. Thank you, Brendan. So we're now looking at what age does one acquire good ethics? And this is something that I started a while back just because I was curious. And it is interesting. So again, if you're interested in what we're talking about, send it over to Brendan. You write down in front of you what age you think, share it, and let's talk about it. But I'm going to get you started here, and certainly if we don't have a lot of dialogue on it, then we'll just move forward. But I have heard, starting with the youngest, that individuals get this immediately from an upbringing. And, what does that mean? When they're told no, they're doing something, they're told no. And it always begs the question, perhaps all of us listening had 2 loving parents that really cared. My wife and I talk about that all the time, how fortunate we were. For me, the word consistency, I just always knew that when I was a child and then a teenager, until I went off to school at age 18, that I was gonna be able to go to my house, and I was gonna have warmth, clothing, food, parents that loved me, parents that cared. And so some of us listening have that. Hopefully all of us did. Perhaps some of us had a parent and then that cared, and maybe a step-parent that cared. Some of us maybe unfortunately didn't have parents that cared. And so it always begs the question, and where do you get this? You get it in school. Maybe you get it from other family members. Maybe you get it in school. And all of you listening know that out there are some teachers that care immensely about their students. And unfortunately, there are some teachers that could care less about their students. If we don't get it in school, then where do we get it? From our friends, peers, peer pressure, on the street, and so it's beyond just, okay, well, we get it as soon as we're our upbringing, because that now varies. We're talking about ethics. Well, we have defined what ethics is. We're just talking about questions of ethics. And so, you know, where do we get good ethics? And the word that's key there is good. Oftentimes I'll ask for ethical stories in a live audience. I don't ask for good ethical stories. I don't ask for bad ethical stories. I just ask for ethical stories, and almost every story I get leans negative, which is interesting. And so that's why if then there's bad ethics, there has to be good ethics. And so, you know, I've happened to see just a couple bounce up on my computer here. I've seen ages 6 to 8, which would speak to what we were talking about with upbringing. Certainly I've seen the word church. In my role today, I have to be careful. I don't want anyone leaving offended. That's not my role today. My role was simply to get you to think. But oftentimes that will come up in is ethics black and white? And if it is, who wrote the book? And then some will say, well, the book has been written already, and it's the Bible. And so when I see at what age does one acquire good ethics, where might they get it? Church. Maybe. You're speaking to someone who understands that comment, but there may be others listening. Certainly if we look at the global picture, you know, churches, Christians would be a minority. And I'm going to end it there because otherwise we could spend an hour just on that. And I'm not saying that individual who put that in is inaccurate. For you, that's probably what worked. I get it. Believe me, I get it. So now we talk about upbringing, and now allow me to take it a step further. Okay? I've had people say age 16, and it was like a magic age out there. When I deal with property and casualty agents, and now there's the giveaway, right? Why age 16? When I deal with property and casualty agents, it almost seems 16 comes up quite often because obviously now individuals are driving. Now, I don't know if there's a correlation between driving and good ethics, but they believe at that age now you pick up a little bit more responsibility. And I understand that argument, okay? Others have said at age 18 because now you have reached adult age and are accountable for your actions. And that's interesting. You know, bad ethics, bad behavior, and now maybe there's some accountability and some repercussions for that bad behavior. So some would argue age 18. I had a conversation once with someone. He brought it up in a session. It was awesome. Gave his logic for it. I had about a 3-hour ride home that night, and I said, I need to think this through a little bit. You know, I'll be thinking about it on my ride home. And what he said was, for him, remember now, look at the age, the question, at what age does one acquire good ethics? He said for him, it was when I had to consider others versus myself. And I'm going to repeat that. For him, it was when I had to consider others versus me. And I said, well, take that a little bit further. And he said, when I had kids. Interesting, isn't it? Just let that sit for a second. Interesting. And now he has children and wants to bring them up in his way, in his definition, properly. And for him, that was a turning point. So we could spend a lot of time on this, Brendan. I'm going to ask you, was there any comment or question that came up? Otherwise, I'm going to sort of summarize this, and we'll move to question number 5.
The only other one that came up echoed some of the previous ones, which was the age of 7, because it's the age of reason. Okay.
All right, good. So thank you. For those of you sharing, I'm grateful for that feedback. I think, and I could speak, I'll speak to myself on this. I'll be 63 next month. I've been licensed for a little over 40 years. I think when I was in college and what I might do and how I might look at it compared to, say, 20 years ago, compared to, in other words, 20 years ago, just prior to when I started studying ethics, so I could do continuing ed classes around the country, compared to now. And while I think or believe I've remained grounded in the important things, I believe that my mind is opened more on looking at other things and being able to put them in their place. And therefore, for me, and maybe for some of you listening, certainly for others. The question, at what age does one acquire good ethics? That maybe the answer is it's a journey, just as our lives are, that it's a journey. So with that, I'll move to number 5. This is huge. Send your feedback over to Brendan on this one. Expertise. What makes someone an expert? Now, we're not to question 6 yet. We're going to put that up next. But it's the word professional. How do you define the word professional? So we're on this one now, number 5, what makes someone an expert. Okay? And then think about what we're doing under number 6. What comes to mind when you think or hear the word professional? What adjective comes to mind? And you put these two words together because some of us, we use that. Some of us like to say we're an expert. I don't know if I'm an expert in ethics. 20 years is a long time to study it. I don't know if I'm an expert. Attorneys in Wisconsin think I am. I don't believe I am, and every time they call me, because they believe an agent in the field has done something unethical, they want me in. And this is interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because when you studied this for your exam, most of you probably had to take an exam to get your insurance license. I don't believe in any state, and I do pre-licensing in a good number of states, and I'll speak to those states. There is no ethics questions on tests because there are law questions, but not ethics questions, because you cannot legislate ethics. Back to question number 1, is ethics black and white? Okay, so if most of us say no to that question, how do you legislate it? And so this is interesting. So when these attorneys bring me in, oh, you're an expert. We want your advice. We want your opinions on this. Well, the first thing I say is my disclaimer. Well, I'm not an expert. Well, yeah, we believe you are. So, okay, let's talk through this. I can say this with certainty, ladies and gentlemen. Not one case ever has gone to court, ever, that I've been involved in. We've done some behind-the-scenes work, some arbitration, stuff like that. It never rises to a level of unethical behavior. You can't legislate it. Unfortunately, for some of the agents, it rose to a level of negligence, meaning they didn't know what it was they were selling. To me, that's worse than unethical behavior, because while one might look at it and say it's unethical, another might look at it and say, no, it's not. Hence, it gets thrown out. But negligence, we can control that as agents. We either know what we're offering or we don't. And there's a company out there, I will not mention the company's name. They have 140 different things they can sell. 140 things that they can sell. There isn't an agent with that company that can know all 140 of those items that they can sell to perfection. Period. And so the ability to do diligence with that is amazing, is immense. And so it begs the question, what makes it, I'd like to think I'm an expert on Social Security. Social Security, retirement, taxation. MDRT used me a number of times. NAIF has used me a bunch. And I think lots of companies hire me to talk to their customers about Social Security, retirement, early, delayed, taxation strategies, things like that. And after 20 plus years of studying that, I think I am an expert in that. But I have to be careful, because when you use the word expert or you say you're a professional, I think you open yourself up to more libel than if you don't say that. But if you want to begin to separate yourself from others, perhaps we use that word. And so allow me to share some things that have come up, some things that I've thunk through, if you will, for the last decades, and then again to fire back and chat back to Brendan would be great. Some would certainly say you garner or become or learn to become an expert through experience. interesting to note that sometimes things just come with life's experiences, wisdom. And I want to be clear, and Brendan knows this about me, from an information technology standpoint, I am terrible. I'm ignorant with some of this stuff. There are grade school children that could run circles around me on that. But there are some things that a younger person just doesn't have yet because they don't have life's experiences. And that only come, you can't buy it. You can't even study it. You can read books, but you haven't lived it. And so some would argue that part of what makes an expert is experience. And certainly I don't disagree with that, number one. Number two, that they have above average knowledge in a subject area. And average may be relevant to all of us that are listening. But they have a greater knowledge, if you will, than in a subject area. I don't disagree with that. Certainly knowing where to find that information. I think you always hear that that's the definition of a genius, right? You don't have all the answers, but you know where to go to get them. Well, some would argue that you have someone now that has lots of experience in a subject area, has great knowledge in that subject area, but if they don't know certain things, they know where to go to get that information. I'm going to add a couple more. For me, I think this one, the ability to communicate your knowledge, I think, is huge. The ability to be able to transfer that knowledge in a way that one person or a group of people listening on the other end can understand it, to me, is huge. I'll give you an example, and I have no problem sharing this with you. It's as personal as it gets. Last July, I was having tremendous pain on my right side, pain that I hadn't felt before, radiating into a couple areas, and one certainly would have been the appendix area. And I had an uncle die of a burst appendix. So this thing would come and go and come and go and come and go, and finally my concern was, and I've had a history of kidney stones, so I thought, okay, maybe it's a kidney stone, but I've never had pain like this before in that area. So I went in the emergency, and they did all the tests, very thorough. Within a 4-hour period of time, we had diagnosed that it was definitely a kidney stone, and I think by the time I left the hospital, it had already passed. However, I went in for my 14-page report, because believe me, they thoroughly tested me. Ultrasounds, I think they even gave me a CAT scan. They did a ton of stuff. And I thought, well, you know what? I think it'd be a good idea for me to have it. It was 14 pages long. So I start reading this report, and I had to have my cell phone so I could Google certain words, Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and a thesaurus next to me to define oh, by the way, and I had a medical book, to define some of the words they were using. And so I'd like to think I have just 1 point above average intelligence. So imagine someone who doesn't have access to the supporting materials I just gave you, and they're reading this, they wouldn't have a clue. And so to me, they cut me right out of the communication process, being able to communicate with them, because I didn't know a half a dozen to a dozen words they were putting in there, defining what it was that was going on in my abdomen. So I think the ability to communicate the above average knowledge you have in a particular subject area based on your experience is huge. And now I'm going to throw this one out for consideration. Give your feedback over to Brendan if you want on this, because this has come up recently. I don't disagree with it. But some have said part of being an expert is having a third-party validation. And so I'd like some of your feedback on it, having that third-party validation. You know, it's great that I can put on a resume that GAMA, NAFIC, that's the National Association of Fraternal Insurance Counselors, that NAFA, that MDRT has used me. Most of them for Social Security at different times. And those of you listening, if you go to MDRT, if you've ever presented at MDRT, you know that you have to be referred in. They vet you pretty well. They could pick anybody they want to do Social Security. They've used me a number of times. They don't normally use speakers back to back, at least that's what I'm told. I'm aware that some of them they have. But for me, hopefully that adds a little credibility for those of you listening. But I don't know. You know, is there any feedback on that? Brendan, has any feedback come in there?
We have actually one participant raising his hand, and so he's unmuted right now if he wants to state his question. Otherwise, in terms of feedback to the question that you just asked, Robin, nothing new in the chat box on that one.
Okay.
David, if you'd like to type your question, that's an option, and also if you'd like to type your feedback.
That's great, and thank you. So, you know, we don't need to spend a lot more time on this. It's just, you know, I remember now 30 minutes ago I said I just want to make you think. So I'm just putting stuff out there, lots of stuff. I've probably spent more time asking people around the country what they believe an expert to be, and as it hones down, one more time, if any of you are choosing to take notes, certainly based on experience, I don't think anyone would disagree with that, that you have great knowledge or greater knowledge in a particular subject area, certainly knowing where to go to get more, the ability to communicate it, and then obviously third-party validation. And who would that third party be? I did see something come through from David talking about maybe at PhD level or a board or something to that effect. I thought I saw that hit my screen real quick or whatever. So maybe, and if I didn't say it, I should have. Credible third-party validation, I think. Credible third-party validation, I think, might hone that in. So, and again, for those of you listening, just be careful. I think, based on my experience with attorneys, that if you purport yourself to be an expert, you might open up a pathway if for some reason you get something wrong. That would only be my comment or coaching there. Brendan, let's move to question number 6. What adjectives best describe a professional? Again, if any of you want to shoot some over. In fact, I'd like you all to do that. I'm looking at that. We've got at least 46 people listening or what have you. It would be great right now for all of you to write one word down. You see the word professional, what adjective comes to mind? One word, one adjective. Okay, excellent. I saw Dan come in with honesty. That's excellent. And just for all of you to do that, that would be great. Because how do you define it? Educated, excellent, from Jennifer, thank you. Complete, competent, from Howard, I think I got that right. A learner, someone who's going to continue to learn, good. These are great. I appreciate you all doing this. Knowledgeable, excellent. And the reason where I'm going with this is I've got 11. Integrity, beautiful word. Genevieve, beautiful word. Genevieve, I'd like you to define integrity. Would you type that back in? How do you define integrity? Because that's open for lots of comments. Experience, great. Keep them coming. I'm seeing all these adjectives come through, and they hit. Do you do the right things every time, all the time? And Genevieve, okay, good. Right things, right. And I know, Genevieve, what's right for you may not be right for someone else listening. Another thing, doing the right thing, good. Honesty. This is great. So here's what I'm going to do. I just want to hit this word integrity because I have Merriam-Webster's online dictionary. Nope, Genevieve, everything's great here. Integrity, Merriam-Webster's online dictionary. I'm not kidding you on this, ladies and gentlemen. about several years ago, they did their top 10 most sought after words on Merriam-Webster's online dictionary. The number one most sought after word was integrity. And here's their definition: firm adherence to a code, especially moral or artistic values, but then they define it in one word, which I think is huge. So integrity, they say firm adherence to a code. They don't say what the code is. Perhaps it's our code, right? And then they go especially moral or artistic values, but then they offer up this word which I want to share with you: incorruptibility. I love that word, incorruptibility, integrity, incorruptibility. So now back to the word professional. What adjectives best describe a professional? I saw a bunch of them come in. It's awesome. Well, that came up a while back. And since I do this stuff all around the country, every group that was manageable. What does that mean? 10, 15, 20 people in a room. I take a flip chart, and I'd start at the beginning of the class, go right around the room, and say, okay, I write the word professional up. What's one word that comes to mind when you hear that word or when you see it? And I literally got tens of thousands of adjectives. Some of them came up today. I'm going to share those 11 with you. And I don't have the benefit of seeing any of you, so if you want to write them down, great. I'll make sure I take my time on these. I'm doing these in alphabetical order. These are the 11. Remember the premise. When you see the word professional or hear the word professional, what adjective comes to mind? Here they are in alphabetical order. There are 11. Number 1, appearance. Now, I want to be clear. I drilled down on that further because it kept coming up over and over and over again. And it wasn't just physical appearance. It was appearance of the agency, appearance of the office. So appearance is broader than just what we might think when we hear that, okay? Appearance. Number 2, articulate. Number 3, committed. Number 4, consistent. So I'll repeat the first 4 one more time for those of you that may be making notes. Appearance, articulate, committed, consistent. And for me, just as a side note, that word consistency means so much. And just taking it out of our definition here for a minute, for you, in your business, for me, it's more in my personal life, how important consistency is. To have friends that you can count on, that if they say something, they're going to do it. That they'll be there for you in your darkest hour. For your spouse, my wife, Kathy, after 5.5 years of marriage, and I married very late in life. I was 41 when I married for the first time. After 5.5 years of marriage, I remember Kathy approaching me, and some of you might know who my wife is. Been in business since '82. Talk about a pro. She said, something's just not right. And I said, well, you're right. You're right, Kathy. And she says, well, what is it? And I said, well, you know, everything's been going pretty good, right? I mean, when everything goes great, everyone wants to hop on and have fun. It's when things don't go so great. And I said, honey, you just haven't been tested yet. You just had a wonderful, charming 5.5 years of marriage. And then it happened, ladies and gentlemen. On March 30th of 2003 at 10 a.m., my father had a massive heart attack. I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to him. He was gone. The last words he said to my sister when they put him in the ambulance, the last words on this planet that he said was, do not call Robin. I don't want him to miss any work. That's a quote. Do not call Robin. I do not want him to miss any work. And that was on a Sunday, by the way, March 30th of 2003, and I had business Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday around the state of Wisconsin. When I got back to my office, I did obviously get to the hospital, and after that I got back to my office, and my wife met me in the office. We embraced, we cried, and she said, I'm going to honor your father, and I'm going to do your jobs on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Thursday, when we celebrate his life, we'll have to postpone that one. And so my dad gets honored on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday by my wife, who does my business. Because obviously when you're under contract, you're booked, you're the program, people expect you to show up. She covered for me. All 3 clients were just fine with Kathy covering for me. I was able to take care of the business necessary at home. We celebrate Dad's life and postpone one session, and they were cool with it, and we rescheduled. And that's when I knew, in my darkest hour, that my wife would be there. And so consistency for me is huge. Now let's put it in our world. How important is consistency for you in your business? That when you tell a client, I'll be there, that you are. That if you have a 24-hour return call policy, that you make sure you return that call within 24 hours, or same-day return call, or 72-hour return, or 1 week, whatever it is that you do. I think that consistency is so important. We're defining the word professional. And the 4th adjective, certainly in alphabetical order, that came up, is consistency. Number 5, empathy. Number 6, ethical. And we haven't defined ethical. That's a program in a box. Brendan can tell you about that. We have a 3-hour, I think, Brendan, they're divided into 1-hour segments, are they not?
You are correct.
3-hour program. Okay. So number 5 is empty. Number 6 is ethical, but we haven't defined what good ethics is. Okay? We're just talking about ethical questions. Number 7, honesty. Now, depending upon, we talked a lot about this, but can I be honest with you but not tell you the whole truth? Some will say absolutely not. Others will say, yeah, I can. And I'll give you an example. I could have Brendan, hey Brendan, ask me this question real quick. Ask me this one question. Robin, can I get my money out of my annuity?
Can I get my money out of my annuity?
Yes. That's an honest answer. I didn't give him everything he needed to know, but I gave him an honest answer. So I'm just sharing with all of you the definition of professional. Certainly one of the 7 adjectives is honest. But if we were defining what good ethics is, we drill down on that further. Okay, so honesty, number 7. Number 8, knowledgeable. I think that something here is knowledgeable in the subject matter. Okay. So again, 5, 6, 7, and 8, empathy, ethical, honest, knowledgeable. Number 9, organized. Number 10, punctual. And number 11, responsible. Now, some of you will change your opinion of me, if you even have one, after I share this story with you on punctuality. I've never been late. I've never been late. Ever. Now, maybe because I grew up in Wisconsin, I grew up during the Vince Lombardi Packers, and Vince Lombardi late was 10 minutes early. And I just remember Dad ingraining that in me. That you're late if you're 10 minutes early. So, ask Brendan. I mean, we were doing this at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock Eastern time. I asked him to hook me up an hour before. That's just me. And then he said, okay, Rob, we're in. Part of it's because I'm ignorant to information technology. Okay? But then we're in 10 minutes we're in, and he said, okay, do you want to exit? And then come back in? I said, no, because how ignorant I am when it comes to technology. So I'm just going to sit here. I can obviously leave my computer, but I'm staying on. He said, okay, fine. So I'll share this story with you very quickly. My stepdaughter is going to introduce us for the first time, my wife and I, to her new boyfriend. Now, this was going to be at a restaurant in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area, and I have about a 3-hour round trip to get there. So I'm driving the furthest. Well, by now you can only imagine who the first one there was, and it was me. And then my wife shows up, and then my other stepdaughter shows up, and then we get a text, or my wife gets a text saying we're going to be late. So that doesn't make me happy to begin with. Just the fact that they're right next door and can't get there on time. That I had the longest drive in winter and got there on time and early. And I'll never forget when my youngest stepdaughter introduces me to her boyfriend. And I looked at my watch and I looked him in the eye. He extended his hand. I extended my hand. I said, "You will not get a second chance to make a good first impression." And so now put it in your business. You've got a 10 o'clock meeting with a client and they show up at 10 to 10 and you don't walk in until 3 minutes after. Now, look, I get things happen. I get construction happens. I get roads closed. I get accidents happen. I get all that stuff. Okay? But imagine, I mean, you could lose a sale because of that. And so punctuality, very important. Number 9, organized. Number 10, punctual. Number 11, responsible. Now, for those of you that sent in some adjectives, you've got some of those, which I think is great. I saw educated, I saw knowledgeable, I saw honest. But when you look at those 11, for those of you that chose to write those down, you could literally agree that you would want that. You'd want that in yourself, and you'd want that in another professional you're dealing with. I mean, there may be others, I get it. But of the thousands and thousands of adjectives that came up when I did this exercise around the country for a couple of years, in every venue that I had when it was appropriate to do it, those are the 11 that came up over and over and over again. So, with that, let's go to number 7. Social responsibility. Well, where does it end for y'all? Are you an agent when you're in your office? Are you an advisor when you're just in front of someone? Are you a broker part of the day? Or are you an agent, advisor, broker, or whatever term you want to give yourself 24 hours a day? That's huge. I aspire to this saying. It's not who you see, it's who sees you. It's not who you see, it's who sees you. And so Brendan knows this about me. If I had 4 people in an audience, 40 people in an audience, 400 people, or 4,000, I give the same presentation. Obviously, I wish you could see me now. I pump it up a little more when I have more people in the room, obviously. I think you get that, right? If I only had 4 people and I'm my normal personality, I'd scare all 4 away, so they'd leave. But from a content standpoint, and it's I just want you to think about what I said. It's not who you see, it's who sees you. You never know who's going to be in your audience. You never know that customer that walks through the door that knows the next person that makes the sale, that makes the career sale for you, the referral, that puts you into that and changes the whole direction of your career. You'll never know that. So, I know people. This is fascinating. I know many stories. I'll share one in the interest of time. I know a property and casualty agent in a small town of Wisconsin called Kiel, Wisconsin. 4,000 people. This particular agent has more than 50% of the town insured. Property and casualty. More than 2,000 customers. She owns the town. And so I'm talking to her. I said, well, do you ever go out and like have a beer or two, or do you have fun? Do you go out and have a drink or two? And she said, yeah, I drive 2 counties away. Now, I want you to think about that. Some irony there, isn't it? I mean, instead of walking or driving a mile to, say, a restaurant, having a couple drinks, She doesn't want her customers seeing her get back into that car. I get there's Uber now. I get all that stuff. But she doesn't want her customers seeing her get back into that car and start that ignition as a property casualty agent. So she'll go a county or two away to do that. And the irony is then now she's driving a distance. But she aspires that it's not who you see, it's who sees you. I get it. And so let me, now none of you can see me. I think that's probably more by design on my end. I said to Brendan, it's not important you see me. It's just not important you see me. But I'm sitting here in my office with my tie on. Just in case, you know, you all are going to be looking or whatever. I wouldn't have to do that. But it's who might see me. And so let me take it one step further. It's also who hears you. So as it relates to social responsibility, you know, are we a licensed agent just when we're in front of someone or an advisor or what have you? Or are we 24 hours a day? And then I leave you with, it's not who you see, it's who sees you. It's also who hears you. My coaching, because I'm around microphones all the time. Just assume they're live. That'll save some of you some embarrassment. Just whenever you're around the microphone, just assume it's live. And that'll save you some embarrassment at some point in time. All right, Brendan, let's go to number 8. If there are no comments on age, I think we've covered expertise, professional social responsibility. We'll move to conflict of interest, and this one goes very quickly. I want you to think about this, because in some states you're a producer. In other states you're an agent. Still in others you're called an intermediary. Well, imagine that. In between, intermediary. An agent represents the company. Yet if I'm the consumer and I don't believe you have my best interest in mind, I'm not buying from you. But an agent represents the company. It means you have to have their best interest first. Think about that just for a second. So you've got me on one side, you got your company on the other, and you're an agent. You've got to represent the company. You've got to have their best interest by law. But if I perceive you've got the company's best interest and not mine, I don't buy from you. And you then are put smack in the middle. Talk about a potential conflict of interest. You can just look around anywhere. And maybe my eyes are just open to it because I've been studying it for so long that I see conflicts of interest everywhere I am. Potential. I guess a better way of saying potential conflicts of interest everywhere I am. Okay? And maybe I'm just more in tune to it. And I could share story after story after story, but time does not allow me. So, Brennan, I just happened to glance at the time, and it looks like we are almost done. Do you want to, in these next handful of minutes, have questions come in that we can talk about here until we conclude? How do you want to handle this?
Well, Robin, while our attendees are formulating their final questions, perhaps we could hit one more slide while they're doing that. I think that might be the best use of our time. Yeah,
absolutely. Good. We've skipped number 9. We've gone to 10, and it's absolutely my favorite. This is my favorite. Now, all of you have your own logic on this, why the public in general leans negative when they hear the word insurance. Make no mistake, they do. They like their agent, but they don't like insurance. In general, the public leans negative when they hear the word insurance. Amazing. So I had a lot of fun with this. There's lots of reasons why. Some would say, well, it's an intangible. Others would say that maybe there's a hassle at claim time. Others would say they don't understand it. Others still say there's a cost involved. I mean, there's a number of them that come up. Okay, I get that. I have some fun with this, and I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to do it very quickly. If you believe that statement, and most people do, that in a general context, okay, why the public in general leans negative when they hear the word insurance in a general context, then I start out my meetings this way, and I have some fun. I have some fun before we even begin, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, I know that what we're going to talk about today is going to cost money, and that it's an intangible, and that you may not understand it, and that you probably don't even like it, and maybe even trust the insurance companies, and you hope it never happens. And if it does happen, it's tied to a negative event. And then if it does happen, maybe you're going to get hassled at claim time. So that being said, where do you sign up for all of this? Now, I want you to think about what I just did. And it's a little bit more difficult to bring that excitement and energy looking at a computer rather than an audience. But I got to tell you what I just did. Why don't you talk about that right up front? If you believe the public leans more negative when they hear the word insurance, then you already know the environment you're going into, and have some fun with it. And say, hey, I got something for you. I know this is going to cost you money, and I know you won't be able to touch it. You know, you probably won't understand it. You might today, but then you're going to forget about it. You probably don't like it. You might not even trust the company. You hope it never happens. If it does happen, it's going to be tied to a negative event. There's only one exception, by the way. That's cash value life insurance, and you didn't die, and you use it to supplement your retirement. Everything else with insurance is tied to a negative event. And oh, by the way, then at claim time, maybe I get hassled. So I bet you just can't wait to sign up for something like this. You get it out up front, you have a little chuckle about it, and then you get into your fact find and you move forward. Full well letting them know you know what they're perceiving about it. But here's what I want to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, and then we'll field any questions that have come in, and then we'll conclude. I want you to think about this for a second. I don't know a single American that has returned a claim check, ever. They might not have liked it. Oh, I had some woman say, well, once my client was paid twice, so they returned it. Well, of course, that's just the right thing to do. That's just the ethical thing to do. So I'm throwing that one out. Now, I get that some people don't like the claim settlement, so they might not cash the check. And they go back and forth until finally they agree to it, and then they cash it. But once that check is cashed, ladies and gentlemen, they agreed to the settlement. They still don't have to like it, but they've agreed to the settlement. Now, I want to go back to this. The public in general leans negative when they hear the word insurance, yet no one has ever sent a claim check back saying, I don't want it. Second, ladies and gentlemen, second only to Social Security in paying money to the American public. The insurance industry is second only to Social Security in paying benefits to the American public. And that's all lines. Last time I looked, Limmer had life insurance at $60 billion last year. $60 billion, that's with a B. Add health insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, annuities, property claims, casualty claims, commercial claims, other personal lines claims. Total them up. Second only to Social Security. We're not the problem. We're the solution. And that's the kind of stuff we need to get out to the public. So with that, believe me, on that last one that you're looking at, we skipped number 9, and we got 11 and 12, we're done. We're out of time. I could have spent a lot more time on this one here, talking to you about some of this stuff. By the way, I want to give you one gem. I shared it first at MDRT in June of 2018. It's the first time I know to ever go public, to ever be said this way, and I wanted to save it for MDRT. Since then, I've been using it on a regular basis. And Brendan, I can't remember if I shared it last time or not, but I want to give you this. This is profound. People don't like paying into Social Security, but they certainly receive those checks. When they receive them, they cash them, right? Now, when someone settles up at retirement, whether it be early, full, delayed, or somewhere in between, and he starts getting that retirement benefit check, Social Security is nothing more than a flexible premium, deferred annuity, put on a lifetime settlement option. That's all it is. It's a flexible premium, you all know that, deferred annuity, that when they take it, it's on a life settlement option. That's amazing. And so for those 3 media personalities that are out there bashing annuities, well, that's what Social Security is. They're not bashing that. It's all Social Security is. It's a flexible premium deferred annuity that when you settle up at retirement, it becomes what? A settlement option. So with that, Brendan, I'll field any questions.
We have one question before we go. How does ethics relate to morality?
Yeah, that's great. And therein lies, I can give you a couple definitions. Black's Law Dictionary says, remember we defined integrity, about that code and moral and artistic values. We bring the word moral up. And then Black's Law Dictionary says, of or relating to moral action, conduct, motive, or character, moral action. So they bring that up. And the question back to the participant is, well, where do we get our morals? Where do we get our values? And most would say from our upbringing. And so now it goes right back to, that's why, is ethics black and white? Well, maybe in a general context, the 40 plus of us that are listening today had a similar upbringing, but maybe we didn't. Maybe it was different. And if that's the case, that's where we get our value system, our morals from. And so then it goes back to the very first question we had in May, is ethics black and white? And if you believe ethics is tied into morals, I don't know that it is, but it might be. If ethics is tied into morals, then that, and we all have, where do we get our morals from? Our upbringing. And if we've all had specifically a different upbringing, then it answers the question, is ethics black and white? Well, it can't be. If we've got 40 plus different upbringings listening, and then we tie in with morals. So that's an awesome question. Some would argue that good ethics would have to be based on good morals, but where do we get those morals from? And that becomes the question. And then we'll take, each one of us will take that down its own path to believe it to be, yes, it is a part of ethics, or it isn't. Any others, Brendan?
That's all the questions we have, and that's all the time we have today. I want to thank all of our participants so much for participating on this presentation from NAFA's Professional Development Department. And I also want to thank Robin Mueller for once again coming back for part 2 of his ethics participation, ethics program. This concludes the webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brendan.